Let's get into it. Soul Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. We got a interesting doozy. This is, if you saw my last episode, just going into some spiritual stuff. Not really spiritual. I don't even know what to call it. Metaphysical. But, Rizwan Verk, that is on Joe Rogan's podcast, is a video game developer who also teaches classes on simulation theory, and he uses his knowledge of both to kind of explain the whole theory. And in this one, he gets into a concept that I have a deep belief in, and that is the soul family. I really do, even as a Christian, I have this deep belief in a soul family, and I'm going to explain that to you right after I play this clip. But he right now is touching on the fact that he had heart issues, and every single time he would try and go back to making money and doing things of the world, materialistic stuff, he would hit more health problems. And when he finally buckled down and did the thing that he always wanted to do, which was right, he had all the energy in the world for it. So that's what you're going to be hearing. That's basically where they are in this conversation. So let's get right into it. Don't forget about the new channel, Coach Colin Media. There's a link in the description. Break away from the Rogan content in this channel. It's a great channel. Guarantee you'll like all the content there. Now, other than that, let's get into this Rogan clip.
And suddenly I found I had more energy when I did that, right? Every time I tried to do something else, my health would start to deteriorate again. And so eventually I got the message. So for the next couple of years, I just focused on writing, right? And that led to this book, The Simulation Hypothesis. And I feel like it was part of my life plan. If you had asked me in high school, what are you going to do with your life? I would have said, I'm going to be a computer programmer, an entrepreneur, sell my company, and become a writer. Right. But I always thought I was going to do that, become a writer in my 20s. When this happened, I was already 48. So I had already I was still in Silicon Valley, right? Still playing the game, trying to build the next billion-dollar company, which is what everybody, tries to do. The next unicorn, they call it in Silicon Valley. And it was like I got this message that there was another part of the story that I was neglecting. Like I had written some books, but it was like a hobby. I was doing it on the side. And then when I focused on it, suddenly it was like, I got the message pretty clearly during that time. And this is sort of a mystical experience. I was going in and out of consciousness a lot while I was recovering. And I would just get the message, you're supposed to be writing. You're supposed to be writing. What the heck are you doing still out there trying to make money? That wasn't what we agreed to. This is what you were supposed to do, right? And when I did that, things just flowed much more easily. And the book went on to be quite successful, and I was able to write another book. And then as my health recovered, I realized there was another thing that I'd always wanted to do, which was be, a professor in academia. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. So I went back for a PhD after many years, and now I'm teaching classes on the simulation hypothesis, doing research on AI. So it was like these things that I kind of wanted to do before and I never got to, but they were optional parts of the story. And we still have the ability to make choices. But sometimes a quest hits us or a situation hits us with a lot of difficulty. And maybe there's a bigger purpose to that, right? Maybe it has something to do with how we set up our character in the game and the choices that we're making. And so now we're getting into the personal philosophy side of simulation, which I think is quite valid. That's probably the second, probably the biggest questions I get asked are we in a simulation? What's the percentage? And then, what would it matter?
Right.
If we're in a simulation or not. And I think it can be a positive experience. And for, I think, people who grew up in the modern world with modern technology, it gives us a way to say, maybe what all those religions were saying wasn't bullshit, right? It wasn't just stories that people made up, but they just didn't have the language to express something that a lot of people who have had near-death experiences, they use the word ineffable, right? Which means unable to be put into words. Mm-hmm. And so they can't really tell you what's out there, but they use these metaphors to try to describe it. And so I think whether you view simulation theory as a hardcore physics thing, or you view it as a metaphor for what this world is all about and how we go through our lives, I think there's value in looking at both of those angles. And the metaphor side is what I think, actually, for me personally, and that was your question, how does this change the way that I view the world? It actually has changed the way that I view the world, so that when I go through difficult situations, I kind of step back. They don't bother me as much. I mean, they still bother me physically, but they don't bother me as much in other ways.
So you view them as challenges in this thing that you're doing. So instead of woe is me, oh my God, how is this happening to me, which is the way a lot of people interface with problems, you go, okay, this is the challenge that I'm presented with. How do I overcome this challenge, and what feels like the thing to do?
Right. And why this challenge now, right?
Right. Why this challenge now?
If there's a part of me that's like outside watching this, right? Like maybe when I go to sleep or wherever, whenever, why would it choose this particular challenge?
Right.
At this point in my life, what is it that, it's meant to impact, and what is it that I need to learn? But yeah, I view it as a challenge rather than, this is just a bad thing that's happened to
And
me.
that seems like the right way to play the game, if it's a game.
Yeah. Not only does it seem like the right way, I think that is part of the purpose, right? So get back to the idea of Maya or illusion, right? So it's like we are agreeing to forget, right? The Greeks talked about the river of forgetfulness, lethe, right? It's one of the 5 rivers in the world. But when you incarnate, Plato talked about this. You cross the river and you forget everything outside of this physical world. And in the Chinese traditions, you have the same thing. You have Meng Po, who's a goddess of forgetfulness. And she brews the tea of forgetfulness, and you drink it and you forget, what was going on before. And so getting back to this idea of everything being an illusion, you kind of agree to forget, in my view, and I think within this way of viewing the world as a video game, in order to enjoy, and I put enjoy in quotes because that doesn't necessarily mean it's all fun and games, right?
Right.
It's maybe experience is a better word to use.
Right.
To experience these things in life in a way that we forget. But it's okay sometimes, I think, to step out and maybe we remember a little bit of the storyline, or we recognize someone, right? There was a hypnotherapist who wrote a book called Journey of Souls, Dr. Michael Newton. I don't know if you ever have heard of it or
No.
read it. So he started with regression hypnosis, taking people back to their childhood, and every now and then they ended up somewhere before their childhood, meaning before they were born. Right, and so he had a bunch of patients, and he started to do this more and more, and they all kind of described a similar type of thing, like where they existed before they were born. So these are sometimes called pre-birth memories now, and they talk about this time when they were choosing what kind of a life they were going to have, and they would see on a screen, again metaphors, like timelines, and say at this point if you choose. You choose to go to Austin or stay in Los Angeles or whatever, right? That takes you on this path. This takes you on that path. That you see like this graph of possibilities out there for your life. And then some of them described like having friends, like your friends list in a game. And that they would say, okay, this is how you're going to recognize me in the game because I'm going to have on this avatar. I'm using the term avatar because I talk about video games. They didn't necessarily use that, but they said this is how you're going to recognize me. The first time you encounter me, I'm going to be on a red bicycle or something, right? In childhood, or I'm going to be wearing this dress at this, at this dance or whatever the case is. So they had these little clues for how they would recognize some of the people that they really wanted to have certain quests or experiences or achievements within the game, group quests, if you will. Which is a little bit different than the kind of quest as the difficult experience we're talking about. But they're all different kinds of quests, I would say. And so I think, we can take that as an interesting way, again, another metaphor for how we think about life is that perhaps we've had some of these things laid out for us, but we're still free to make our choices along the way. And I think it gives us a richer experience of life as we go through the game.
Well, that's certainly the most beneficial way to interact with it. To just think of this whole thing as a game and to think of this whole game as like this game will give you clues as to how to play it, and you'll have experiences that you can engage with and you can say that you're enjoying them or that you're getting pleasure out of that or you're getting excitement out of that or you're getting some sort of fulfillment out of that. But you still have to play the game. So you're here.
Right,
like,
you're here one way.
What are you going to do?
One way or the other.
How are you going to deal with it? Like, what's the beneficial way to go through this where you feel harmonious? Like, I know if I feel like I'm wasting time or I'm doing nothing, I have this like feeling like, oh, what did you do with your day? Like, ugh, it's a terrible feeling. Versus if I work and I get things done, at the end I'm like, ooh, I did it. I feel good. Like, okay, like the universe, the game is telling me you're on the right path. That's the way to do it.
Right, and I think that's the key is, we all get different messages for when we're on the right path and when we're not. And I think we sometimes sense that, right? Sometimes things just kind of flow easily and other times they don't necessarily. But yeah, I agree. I think, viewing the game in that way based on your own signals in your brain, in your
Right.
body, that
Your
is telling you
intuition.
your intuition, right?
Right.
And there's different ways to think about that. Like some people have suggested, like some physicists have suggested, that there are these possible futures, and that they are sending back information from the future to the present, right? Because
Man, a lot of these physicists and science, man, they sound more like conspiracy theorists than anything. I think conspiracy theorists and these scientists need to come together. They need to come together. They got a lot of the same ideas when it comes down to it. Absolutely wild. Now, the stuff that he's first off, what he just said right there, like future selves, like he starts touching on dreams. I was talking with my friend today, and I'm like, that's exactly how I feel when I have a dream. I don't know if it's a different possibility for myself or what it feels like to me is like a different timeline, because I'm always me, but it's completely like just today I had a dream where I was at this dinner party. Like, I mean, like real, like Met Gala type of people, those real hoity-toity type people, and for me, like, I dress like this all the time. I always am in hoodies and sweats. And I was dressed in this crazy suit, and my wife was too, and there were guys who were like, "Hello, Colin," and I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, hey, how you doing?" And in my head, I'm this me, and I'm like, "What is going on right now?" We're at this big party. It was so weird. And I'm like, was that just another version of me? There's so much to this episode. I'm telling you, man, they touch on so many different weird things. Even in this little clip that I showed you, they're talking about friends in the afterlife and the before, and even how he got to the concept of the soul family. That's what I call it. That's what I've always called it. He was just talking about friends, like a friends list. See, and that's what he does so well. He tries to break it down in lingo that applies to today. So he'll use technology, he'll use social media, he'll use video games. And that's what really makes what he's explaining rather special, because when we have it in, I don't know what to call it, early speak, Bible speak, scripture speak, it doesn't ring as true to us if we're not exposed to that all the time, But when you break it down like, yeah, and you're in the afterlife and you have a friends list, you're like, okay, I understand exactly what he means, But even how he got to that point, talking about people having their memories of childhood and then going further back. It's really, really interesting stuff, man. And even to that, I have a story about that as well. Let's get on to the soul family, because I looked it up and it's actually a thing. And I wrote up a soul family concept and it actually came up as a thing. And I had no idea. I've never heard this from other people. Now, I've only heard like the concept of you choosing, and that's what I'm touching on right now. I have this thing because, people often are like, what is he a coach of? I actually do coach people. And I have this thing that I do with clients where it's a practice of changing resentment into gratitude. And one of the things that I always use as an example is you kind of, I don't want to say you choose your parents, but this is what happened to a client. A client was talking with a young kid, and the young kid was like, I chose to be in mommy. Like, I chose it, right? It was very odd, very odd. I never got to meet the kid or anything, but she was just telling me this. She's like, I chose to be in mommy. That's what the kid said. And it took us down this rabbit hole as we were in our session, and I was talking about, like, imagine you do choose your parents, right? Because this person was having a hard time with their parents. They didn't like the relationship that they had. They're older now and they just don't like the way that their parents acted. And I was like, I can relate. I didn't like the way my parents acted, but you got to turn that into gratitude, right? So I said, think about it. If you did choose them, think about how much they actually taught you throughout your entire life. For me, I can use the example of my father. My father wasn't a present father. And because of that, it taught me, and my mom was not into saying like, I love you and stuff like that. So through those two, I had these deep lessons of, I know what it's like to not have someone to say I love you to me ever. I know how bad that can feel. So it never happens for me and anybody who I love. Let them know all the time. And then also, Father was very neglectful. He wasn't around. So right away, from the time I was like 15, I wanted to be a father. Didn't want to go about it, and be a teenage father, but I always wanted to be a father. I always wanted to be a husband. I always wanted to be able to tell my family that I love them. Always, always, it's always what I wanted. And I notice that would that have happened if I had different parents? And it's almost like I chose these lessons because now it fits perfectly in the life that I have. And now my baby is getting all of the things that I didn't get. Or I could look at it as all the lessons that I was taught from these parents that I've chosen. And, it just, I just brought that up because sometimes you got to change your resentment into gratitude. It helps a lot. But let's just move on to the soul family concept and what my client brought up about the kid choosing their parents. Think about that whole concept, right? Don't you have, I don't know if I'm the only one. Don't you have friends? Let's say you have a brother and you have a sister. Don't you have friends where you're like, oh, this person's more my family than my family? There's just certain people you meet in life where you're just like, oh, I'm going to be around this person forever. You can know them for like a week, maybe a month. Childhood friend, you're just like, they're for forever. We're going to be linked. Like, it's just not going to stop. That's the concept of a soul family. You actually had these people around you in past lives. Every time you all descend back to wherever it is that you go, supposedly, allegedly, you all meet up and you say, all right, let's do it again. But this time we're going to be here. This time we're going to do this. You got to meet me here. I'll be on the mountaintop. I'll be here. I'll be there. Think about it's the same concept of a soulmate. That's what a soulmate is. Someone that you've been in love with throughout lifetimes, Like I remember my wife and I were together for like 3 months. And she's like, it feels like I've known you for years. And it was very much mutual, And I've had other women say stuff like that, but I was like, yeah, right. No. But with her, I was like, yeah, it actually does. It feels like we've known each other for a very, very long time. I have friends like that as well. Let me just go through the concept so you guys can understand. I'm giving you a little breakdown of what I know. But a soul family is a group of individuals who share a deep emotional connection and are connected on a spiritual level. They're often referred to as a collective group of beings who are on similar wavelengths and energetically connected, related, and in tune with each other. This connection is not limited to a single lifetime, but rather transcends multiple lifetimes, with individuals in the soul family being drawn to reunite and continue their spiritual journey together. It's very interesting. According to some spiritual beliefs, a soul family is formed through spiritual bonds and energetic alignments and is not limited to biological or earthly ties. This concept of a soul family, often associated with the idea of reincarnation, where individuals are believed to be reborn into different bodies, lives, but retain their spiritual connection to their soul family. I have that. I had a gentleman on this podcast recently, and I don't know if this is it, but it's very weird. We met each other very randomly, and as soon as we met, had a very similar style with how we dressed, definitely super similar with how we thought, everything. And we met. And this is like brothers. This is not no weird stuff, okay? No weird stuff. I know Pride Month's coming up, but no weird stuff, okay? No weird stuff. But we met years ago, like 2018, 2019, and we've talked every single day since. We don't even get to see each other that much because, I'll be, I love Texas. He's California. He's all over the place. He's Europe. He's moving around, So we don't get to see each other much, but we talk every single day. And it was just natural. It was just natural to just do that out of nowhere. It's very odd. There's just and I don't do that with my own brothers. You know what I mean? There's certain people where you just have this weird connection right away, and it's unexplainable, and it feels good, and it's mutual. That's the big thing. It's mutual. It's like you both are just on that wavelength right away, and it never goes away. That's another big indicator of that. And I have that with a few people in my life, and I consider them brothers. I say it all the time. Sometimes I'll be talking about my brother and I'm talking about one of those people. I'm not talking about one of my blood brothers. So it's very odd, but I think it's very, very real. And if you're lucky enough to have those connections, you should really stick by them. You know? I mean, obviously if the person's absolutely terrible, you know what I mean. But if you're lucky enough to experience something like that, you should keep it, within reason. But it's very odd, and it makes you think, like, is there a chance that you're choosing your parents? And for some people who have terrible parents, you're like, absolutely not. I didn't choose this. I won't put that on myself. And that's part of when I'm coaching people, I kind of make them go through that, because it's the best to have complete ownership of your life rather than place blame here and place blame there. No matter how horrible the thing was that happened, you still got to take ownership, because once you take ownership, you take power, and then you can implement the change. But if you put power into someone else, you can't go to them. And who wants to live a life where you have to go to other people and say, change my life? You don't want that. That's terrible, right? But it just makes you think, maybe we do choose all of this, And then even when they're talking about career, is there certain things that you've ever felt where you're like, oh, I know I'm supposed to do this thing? Some people never go through that. Some people know the thing that they want to do, but they never go and do it. And when I first started this podcast, I would always talk about this. Always go and do it. Whatever it is, always go and do it. For me, stand-up comedy. 100%. It's stand-up comedy. I think about it every single day. There's not a day that hasn't gone by since I was like 10 years old where I haven't thought about it, and it used to scare me, and now it's something that I long for, and I'm definitely going to be doing that. So, and I do it. I do it. I've done it. It's just, I want to do it more, But yeah, everybody has that thing, and maybe there's a reason for that, like things end up flowing a lot better. That's what Rizwan said when he's talking to Joe Rogan. He had no energy when he tried to just make money for the sake of making money, but when he went towards writing, he had all the energy in the world. I think everybody has a little something like that. And sometimes we just push through that terrible feeling of, we know we should be doing something else. We just push through it. And sometimes the things that we're feeling as we do that, I really do think there is an element of your spirit, your soul, that is saddened and will make things not go right. Before I started this podcast, you know what happened? I got a job. I was the head of human resources for this company. The head. And I was like, this is it. Finally, support my wife. Have kids. We're good. Lied on my resume so much, but I interview real good. Shouldn't have done that. But I really wanted a job, and I knew I could do the job. I understood how to do the job. I've taken supply chain management. I've taken human resources. I understand the job completely. And I wanted it, and I got it. And I was working in smaller company, not a huge company, smaller company. And I was doing Uber Eats on the side. I was doing both at the same time. Can't serve two masters. Can't do that. It doesn't work. So I'm doing the job that I think is the thing that I have to do. And I'm doing Uber Eats, and that's paying the bills like immediately, because you get your money right away. And slowly it got to a point where my health was deteriorating at a rapid pace. My mind, I felt so foggy, and then I wasn't doing either well. And it was not good, right? And then all of a sudden a certain bill hit. I think it was rent or something. And I wasn't going to be able to pay it with that job because they weren't paying soon enough. And I had to do Uber Eats through the day in order to, it was just it was just a mess. And I was like, God, why are you doing this? Why can't you just get me through this little hump so I can stay at this job and I will just work this job forever? And I was like, well, whatever. I study with a lot of Christians. I'm part of a Christian men's group. So I understood. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I just have to have faith, and health was deteriorating. Everything sucked. I had what I wanted, what I thought I wanted, but everything sucked. And the second that I dropped that job, which I did not want to drop, I literally quit, and then I went and cried in my car because I had no choice. I was like, I can't believe this. I'm like in a suit, crying, about to go do Uber Eats. It was like terrible. And a month later, I started the podcast. And like 3 months in, I got my first video that was like 1 million views. And slowly it just upped and upped and upped and upped. And I went from like 150 subscribers to like 20,000. And it was because I started doing the thing that gave me all the energy. You know? It was weird. It's such a weird thing. And you know, I will always credit God, but in a sense, is there something that's like you're not supposed to be doing that thing, and because you are, I do have a not concept, but I feel like when we're not supposed to be doing what we're supposed to do, and you know what the thing is you're supposed to do, life will make itself very hard for you because you're not doing the thing, you know? I really do think that. I know I'm just rambling. This man, this episode is golden. I'm telling you, go watch this episode. Here's a couple of things here. If you ever want to know if you got a soul family, which I know you do. If you've listened this far, you know who those people are in your life. You know who they are. For better or for worse, you know who those people are. Some common signs that you might have reunited with your soul family includes a deep feeling of a deep sense of familiarity and comfort with the person, sharing similar views, interests, and life experiences, being able to communicate openly and honestly with each other, feeling a strong emotional connection and a sense of empathy, sharing a sense of purpose and destiny with each other. Feeling a deep sense of trust and understanding with each other. Those are just some of the things. And everybody has those people. You meet them, and then that's it. And you just never let each other go. It's weird. It's a weird thing. Anyway, and like I said, no weird stuff. No weird stuff, okay? I know pride's coming up. No weird stuff. You know what I mean, okay? This is masculine spiritual stuff I'm talking about here. This is masculine spiritual stuff, okay? All right? Anyway, again, go check out that episode, man. There's a link in the description to the Spotify. It's absolutely great, man. But anyways, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Other than that, I'm out.